All right. You almost hit me?
I think so.
Okay, all right. So we, unfortunately, Marshall Steinbaum could not get out of Utah because of snow and weather. So we have a little bit of time. We're going to start 15 minutes late, but we'll make up for time. You'll have your breakout rooms and your lunch and all the breaks promised. So I am Teresa Ghilarducci. I'm the professor of economics here at the New School, and I want to welcome you to this historic university. Even though we're called the New School, we're old. We have been in existence for more than 100 years, having broken off from Columbia to come down to the village and start a new school where the curriculum came from the people and came of the times. In 1930s, when Jewish professors of German universities were being fired from those universities because of the rise of the fascists there, the Rockefeller Foundation funded 35 professors to come here to the New School to start a think tank at an Institute of Advanced Studies of Social Scientists so that it would never happen again. Hannah Arendt and others were part of that university in exile. And so we have always been a division of social scientists. Economics is of one, to make sure that we have democratic societies. And so today we are gathered here because we are looking at ways where we could reorient our modern economic regulation for the kind of modern democracy that we know, that we are fighting for. Part of our institution has created PhDs that are doing that as we sit here. Heather Boucher is a PhD from our department. She's sitting in the White House now. Mariana Mazzucato is writing books and organizing around how to shape regulation of a modern and progressive economic society. Lenore Palladino is teaching, and we have Kate Bond, all PhDs from this department. This conference happens to be in that same project, creating a modern democratic society, looking at workplace democracy, and now, just today, looking at an area of collective action on antitrust policy. A lot of attention has been paid to the Biden administration's implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the labor provisions that are part of that act. And it leads us to look more broadly at the entire administration's pro-worker actions in vendor relationships and regulations in the legislation that it supports. For example, the Federal Trade Commission has taken a pro-worker leap by exposing non-compete clauses for creating undue market power or creating monopsony power. And in a possible signal of a pro-worker turn in merger review at the Department of Justice and FTC, some recent cases have consulted worker representatives and considered fair market functioning, not just lower prices as a criteria. The two agencies are working on refreshed merger guidelines that harken back to the statutory intent, Nelson will be talking about that, of the Clayton Act, which is to place effective limits on corporate consolidations and corporate power. There is much potential, that's why we're here today for the whole day, for a progressive and productive use of government regulatory power to lift up the status of working families. This conference will address what robust pro-worker antitrust enforcement and policy can look like. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. So again, I'm Sarah Stephens. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Communications Workers of America. And a really important part of my job, and my favorite part of my job, is to stand with workers who are trying to form a union. So when workers organize, we have their back, not just with our CW resources, but also in the public square. I yell at their bosses with them, as I got to do last night with our Bird Union members here in New York, while our legal department helps them file unfair labor practice charges at the NLRB. And workers organizing where their employers are hostile will always be something that's close to my heart, because that's how I came into the labor movement. By organizing my own workplace, a daily newspaper in Northern California, and I learned firsthand how the laws that are supposed to protect us when we're organizing our unions really aren't adequate when you need them, especially when I was fired 2 weeks after our successful vote. But right now, we are living in a time when people are hungry for democracy at work. Worker organizing has been on fire these past few years. The courage of these workers and their wins has been hugely inspiring. So, as we say at CWA, when we fight, we win. And over the past few years, we've helped thousands of people join CWA and win their union votes in media, tech, the video game industries, in manufacturing, retail. We even have one of the nation's first union Apple retail stores in Oklahoma City, where despite management's persistent over-the-top anti-union campaign, workers voted by a huge majority to form their union anyway. But these workers are winning despite a system that's rigged against them. And it shouldn't be so hard to exercise our right to form a union. To truly empower working people and their families, we need a wholesale change, a true shift to a democratic society where everybody can survive and thrive. We need a political transformation. So with a pro-union president like Joe Biden, we've made some headway. Earlier this month, the White House Task Force on Worker Empowerment provided an update on its efforts to advance worker rights, including the right to a free and fair choice to join a union and to dignity in the workplace. And one marker of progress there that the task force reported, 80,000 federal employees have joined unions in the past year or so that's increasing the union representation of federal employees by 20%. Another good sign, the antitrust agencies are showing that they're serious about analyzing power imbalances and dysfunctional markets, which you're going to hear a lot about today. So what do we hope is going to come out of this unique gathering? So for one thing, we want to build stronger relationships. We all need each other. Unions of working people need to build strong alliances, not just with our communities, but with people in the academic world and the policy world. Not only are our fights interconnected, but I really believe that they are the same fight, the broad-based movement for economic and social justice in this country. So we'd love for everyone here to come away from this conference with a stronger network and a contact list. So we'll make sure we have everybody's permission before sharing it, but that should be a definite goal. And we're also here to center collective bargaining as a key means of building a fairer economy, and to talk about all the tools that are available to government to advance workers' access to this powerful tool. This is a matter of justice, and it's a matter of functional markets. If you want to build justice, you need unions. In our unions, workers have a powerful tool to demand equal pay for equal work, to address safety hazards on the job, to address racism and occupational segregation, to demand equity for LGBTQ families, and to bargain for a fair share of the earnings from our labor. Unions, by the way, are the only place where the wage gap is actually closing. I think that's a really important thing to keep track of. So, back when Congress passed the Clayton Antitrust Act in 1914, its labor provisions were intended to recognize workers' legitimate need to take collective action in order to counterbalance employer power over the labor markets. So after years of bloody police action against strikers and boss-friendly courts that were granting injunctions against strikes, unions finally had some legal protection. And then in 1935 came the National Labor Relations Act, which, by the way, is the first thing I read when I decided to get involved in union organizing in my workplace. It's a beautiful and stirring document for any worker that wants to organize, because it officially makes it the policy of the United States to give this right to workers to benefit the free flow of commerce. I'm going to spare you reading the whole thing, but to restore the equality of bargaining power between employers and employees. That is the intent of the act. It understands that our economy does not work when the bosses hold all the power. But the act's protections to counterbalance that employer market power, which were won during periods of worker uprising and when there was broadly felt economic misery, were only ever partial. They didn't include millions of workers, especially workers of color employed in homes and in farms. And then they were significantly undercut, as we all know, by later amendments to the Clayton Act, by the Taft-Hartley Act, that prohibited secondary boycotts, weakened the right to strike, and had many other anti-union provisions. But still, during that period, which lasted a few decades of greater attention to market power, the state set strong limits on mergers, prevented large corporations from controlling their suppliers. It imposed heavy regulations on essential industries like telecom, which is near and dear to our heart in CWA. So we understood at that time that the state could rein in corporate greed, but also encourage innovation, and that the rising tide of shared productivity gains would lift all boats. And that worked, at least until the policies began to be dismantled in the 1970s and the 1980s. We know that corporations were desperate to wrestle back their dominion over our economy. Domination is probably the right word. We teach CWA members about this time. We run a training called Reversing Runaway Inequality, and we share the 1971 Powell memo that I know many of you are familiar with, which was written to the Chamber of Commerce by corporate lawyer and future Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell, which urges the business community to promote its economic interests by investing in think tanks, academic institutes, media organizations, and yes, a broader and more vigorous role in the political arena. So we're living today in the results of that 50 years, more than 50 years of effort to have a more vigorous role, corporations in controlling the economy. And what do we have? Unprecedented income inequality, more workplace injuries and deaths, countless examples of the disastrous impacts of runaway corporate power. But the failures of unfettered capitalism, I truly believe, do not have to be our future. The labor movement and the safeguards once built in our country, we can build those again. So we've engaged optimistically as the Biden administration has picked up the mantle of FDR, calling for a whole of government approach to empower workers. And we hope to join with all of you advocates in this room to broaden our collective vision of what's possible when we fight together. And to the regulators, we hope this conference will spur further dialogue, especially with us in labor unions on the crucial issues of market power, labor exploitation, and pathways to collective bargaining. So thanks so much. I'll turn it back over to Professor Gilliger.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I would like to invite the first panel.